Good morning, SA2. This is our lesson for Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. Okay, yesterday you read some decimals and your parents had a checklist to see that you were reading the decimals correctly. Hopefully everyone did well with that and they were able to read decimals to the thousands place. Today we're going to be reviewing comparing decimals, seeing which decimal is larger and which decimal is smaller. Okay, so let's look at our rules for comparing decimals. Okay, when we compare decimals, first thing we want to do is compare the digits in the greatest place value. So if we had the two decimals, 3 and 6/10 and 3 and 8/10, we would look at the greatest place value, which is the ones place. Okay, and if you notice in the ones place, both of them have a 3 in the ones place, so they're the same. So then our second step would be continue comparing until the digits are different. So you move on to the next place value. The next place value would be the tens place. So in 3 and 6/10 we have a 6, and in 3 and 8/10 we have an 8. Okay, so you would look to see which digit is larger, which digit is smaller. And we know that 8 is greater than 6. So 3 and 8/10 is greater than 3 and 6/10. Okay. Another way to compare decimals is to use a number line. Okay. Look at the first set of numbers that are in blue. Okay, they go from 0 to 1 whole. Okay, and we have 5/10, 6/10, 7/10. So you can arrange your numbers on a number line. Okay, picking the 2/10 that they're in between and then seeing which one is larger. Okay, so if we were comparing the decimals 2 and 5/10 and 2 and 3/10, we would make a number line between 2 and 3 and put those decimals on a number line to see which decimal is greater and which decimal is smaller. So that's just another strategy you can use. Okay, and we know the numbers to the left are smaller and the numbers to the right are the greater decimals. Okay, so it says circle the greatest decimal. Okay, let's look at our decimals. We have 10 and 525 thousandths, 10 and 522 thousandths, and 10 and 515 thousandths. Okay, if you look at those decimals, they all look pretty similar. Okay, remember our first rule. What does our first rule tell us to do? To look at the decimal in the greatest place value. Okay, the greatest place value would be the tens place, which is a 1. Okay, they all have a 1 in the tens place. Look at the ones place, 0. They all have a 0 in the ones place. So then we keep moving to the next place value. And the next place value is a tenths. Remember, that's after the decimal point. Okay, so we have a 5, and a 5. So they're the same also. So we have to move on to the next place value, which is a hundredths place. Okay, we have a 2, and a 1. Okay, we know that 2 is obviously greater than 1, so we can eliminate this last decimal. So then we would just be comparing these two decimals to see which one is the greater decimal. Remember, we stopped at the hundredths place where they both had a 2, so then we move on to the thousandths place. This has a 5 and this has a 2, right? We know 5 is greater than 2, so the greatest decimal here is 10 and 525 thousandths. Okay? Let's look at the next set of decimals. We have 8 and 7/10, 8 and 8/10, 8 and 75 hundredths, 8 and 79 hundredths. Okay? If you look at the value in the ones place, they all have an 8. So we need to move on to the tenths place. Okay? In the tenths place, we have a 7, an 8, a 7, and another 7. Okay, so we could definitely tell you right away which one is the largest, 8 and 8/10, because 8 is greater than 7. Okay. If you look at the next set of decimals, 31 and 3/10, 35 and 3/100, and 39 and 33/100. Okay, we can look at the whole numbers first. Remember, you're looking at the greatest place value first. We have a 3, a 3, and a 3 in the tens. And then we have a 1, a 5, and a 9 in the ones place. You could also look at them as whole numbers. So we have a 31, a 35, and a 39. Okay, if we're putting those numbers on a number line, which one would be the greatest number? 39 is the greatest number. Which one is the smallest number? Right? 31 would be the smallest number. Okay, so right away we know which is the greater decimal and which one is the smallest decimal. Okay? Another way to compare decimals is to line up your decimals on a decimal chart. Okay? You can make one on a piece of paper, or you can print one that I put on the website as a guide, a blank one. Okay? You can write the numbers in. Okay? You have 8 and 75/100, 8 and 79/100, and 8 and 8/10. Okay? So we know that in the ones place, the 8 is the same. So we move on to the tens place, right? We have a 7, and an 8. Okay? Right away we know that 8 is the greater value, so we can stop at that place value. So we know 8 and 8/10 is the greatest decimal. If we wanted to find the smallest decimal, you would keep going. So we know 7 and 7 are the same, so we would have to move on to the hundredths place. And we have a 5 and we have a 9. 5 is smaller than 9. So the smallest decimal would be 8 and 75/100. Okay. Okay, let's look at our next set. Okay, we want to find the smallest of the decimals. So we have 3 and 6/100, 3 and 9/10, and 3 and 9/100. Okay. If you look in the greatest place value is a ones place, they all have a 3. So we have to move on to the next place value, okay, which is the tens place. Here we have a 0, right? Here we have a 9, and here we have a 0. Okay, if we're trying to find the smallest decimal, we can eliminate the 9 because 9 is greater than 0. So we know that that's the largest. So then let's look to our next place value, which is our hundredths place. We have a 6 and we have a 9. Which one is smaller? 6 is the smallest number. So 3 and 6/100 would be the smallest decimal. Okay. This is a great exercise for students because it lets them understand the value of numbers, the value of place value, having number sense, which is very important, especially when we're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Okay, the kids need to have an understanding of which number is greater and which number is smaller. Okay, especially when we're subtracting, we need to know that the greater number is on top. Okay, so this is a great strategy and a great concept for students to practice. Okay, let's look at our next one. 4 and 344 thousandths, 4 and 443 thousandths, and 4 and 3/10. Okay, they all look very similar, very close to each other. So sometimes it gets a little confusing. 4 is all in the ones places. Move on to the next place value. We have a 3, a 4, and then a 3. Okay. So we know 4.3, the next place value in the hundredths place would be a 0. Okay, so if we have a 0 here and we have a 4 here, we know that 0 is smaller than 4. So the smallest decimal would be 4.3. Okay, we know that 4.3 is smaller than 4.34. Okay, you could also think of it in terms of money. $4.30 is a smaller amount than $4.34. Okay, so if you want to think of it in terms of money and say it that way, it might make it a little bit more concrete for your students. Okay, so as far as the activity is concerned, you're going to have a sheet that looks like this. You're going to circle the greatest decimal and you're going to circle the smallest decimal. Okay, if you wanted to print this out, you could, or if you wanted to do it on a separate piece of paper, that's also fine. Okay, or say this is Study Jams. It's called Place Value of Decimals. When you watch the video, you're going to hit step by step. Okay, you're going to hit that first. You're going to watch the video and then you're going to test yourself. Okay, so you can play around with these activities too if you don't want to do the worksheet, or if you don't have ink or you don't want to do that. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.